Okay, awesome. I think we pretty much have everyone here. First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for being here. I wanted to thank Chris and Tung Pang for being on this panel talk. I'm thrilled to welcome you all to the panel discussion on exploring art, identity, and the ordinary with Chris Huen and Tung Pang Lam. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we're gathered here on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. It's a privilege to be here, and we honor the indigenous presence and resilience of these communities. So today we have a great pleasure of inviting our exhibiting artist Chris Huen to have a conversation with another very brilliant artist, Tung Pang Lam, who currently lives in Vancouver. So before we start, I wanted to give a brief introduction about both of the artists. Give me a moment. There we go. Reception is a little awkward. Okay, there we go. So Chris Huen was born in 1991. There we go. Sorry about the technical issue. So Chris obtained his BA in Fine Arts at the Chinese University of Hong Kong in 2013 with an emphasis in painting. His practice explores the moment and exquisite experiences of everyday life. The artist believes that the essence of existence should not be constructed nor constricted by conventions that are the result of a collective cognition. Instead, he believes that life should be informed by intuition on a personal level. He's particularly drawn to fanatical behaviors and trivial moments that carry immense vitality, such as a small dog or an ordinary woman. Chris' large-scale oil paintings, a constellation of flash marks, often starring a cast of recurrent characters, including his wife Hayes, son Joel, daughter Tess, and dogs Buzz, Lily, and Dudu, which you will be able to see them in all the paintings that we have exhibited here. Evolve organically and haphazardly. Chris forgoes under drawings and sketches, and rather than paint from the photograph or from the scene itself, he opts to eternalize the minute and the transient from feeling and memory. His technique, imbued with both deft abstraction and the hallmarks of traditional Chinese ink painting, involves layering one depth paint over another until the pattern on the canvas perfectly echoes the spirit of the scene. Through this progress, Chris wants to discover the distance between appearance and our cognition of things. Tung Pang Lam, also born and raised in Hong Kong, worked as an artist between Hong Kong, London, and Beijing in his early stage. He now lives and works in North America, between North America and Hong Kong. Tung Pang experienced the coming age of coincides with drastic social changes, a result of his homeland's decolonization from constitutional monarchy and new religions of China in a short span of time. Traversing between the media of painting, site-specific installations, sound, and video, Lam's playful practice arises from a curious imagination that combines traditional iconography and vernacular elements, innovating with weird and found objects and images to form new practices that are often experimental in nature. Tung Pang's work is collected by LACMA in Los Angeles, Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, Berger Collection, the Deutsche Bank, Royal Bank of Canada, Hong Kong Museum of Art, Catalyst Art Foundation in France and the US, World Rapid Contemporary Chinese Art Collection in Australia, and M+ in Hong Kong, among others. He was awarded the Hong Kong Arts Council Scholarship and the Asian Cultural Council Fellowship to live and work in London and New York, respectively. And in 2012, he was awarded the Outstanding Contributions to the Development of Culture and Arts by the Secretary for Home Affairs, Hong Kong. Recent exhibitions include a solo exhibition at the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, an exhibition in the Seattle Asian Art Museum, and Crown Museum at the University of Texas. So when we first started the conversation about this panel discussion, we first engaged in conversation with Chris, and Chris mentioned that he has a really good friend as well as a mentor who actually lives in Vancouver, and that's where the conversation comes together. So I believe you both met each other when you were still in university in Hong Kong, right?
When we actually met in Chinese Yuan, I think it was in 10. I met Chris. He shows his talent even when he was in the year one students in university. So I taught only 2 classes probably in my life only. That is like drawing fundamental for the 5 department in Chinese youth. So at that time, Chris was in the class, and I still remember he's very talented. And what I mean to be talented as a student or artist is not only he shows his technique. At that time, he is like have a lot of thinking behind his drawing. So I remember at that time he is doing kind of drawing like dramatic. It's like a lot of brushstroke dancing around on the surface. And that probably is quite unusual for artists like his young age. And then as a year one student, that could have such a mature technique. At the same time, he questions a lot about the drawings. I'm not sure how much you remember that class, but we actually met in that class. And I remember one thing is like, because it's called drawing fundamental, I asked them, could you think what does fundamental mean right now in the contemporary world? So all this kind of drawing with all geometric shape or shadows, shading, that kind of technique is always kind of fundamental that we understand, right, from drawing practice. But at that time, I think probably you will have a hard time with me in the class, right? How do you remember that class?
I mean, like at that class, I think, yeah, in hindsight, I was like overjoyed, and because I just get into the university as a first year student, and then I remember like when you're teaching that class, and then you gave us like 5 assignments, and then I end up doing like 50 drawings. Like I always like do 10 times more than what you wanted me to do, and then I I was just like grabbing you, and then to ask about your opinion, and then trying to learn more and more, and yeah, I think that was a really, I mean, in the first year of university, it was a like great experience.
Is it that time that you're really into the drawing? Because I can find your painting here. It's always with a lot of gesture, brushstroke, that you emphasize a lot of this kind of lines. Is that your, I would like know like before or like even in your high school, what is actually like most influential artist or work that inspire you a lot?
I think at that time there was a very important exhibition going on in Hong Kong, which is the Chinese master Wu Guangzhong. Yeah, and then so basically at that period of time, he's like in his like 90, I think, and then he's kind of donating his majority of works to the Hong Kong Museum of Art as a gift, and then it was like a very big exhibition going on.
At your high school?
Yeah. Before, like, I think it was this summer before when I go to uni, and I was like talking about my experience of learning art in Hong Kong. Is that there is an illusion when I was very young, and then we always think like Western art is somehow superior, and then like Chinese art is in a way more old-fashioned and inferior. And then for so long, when I was interested in art, that I kind of neglected like this part of the art practice. But only when I was like
In Chinese view?
yeah, studying in Chinese U, and then I start to kind of have this revisit, and then I suddenly have this idea of like what painting could be, like what, yeah, because when we are in Hong Kong, and then we have this two-way point that the traditional Chinese art, and also yeah, but I think we would talk more about it.
But actually, even we are like 10 years of difference, but we share the same experience. I mean, when I was in high school or when I was in primary school, I mostly like study art, but then we were like inspired from Impressionism, and that time, and I mean, it's very different to Canada. I have a kid here. When they study art here, they will start with a group of 7, right? And that's how I know, oh, Canada, and group of 7, then they have like, all this painting. That's kind of representing the national. But in Hong Kong, we at that time we are like still like British owned. And I mean, like for me at that time in the 90s, in high school we don't really learn Chinese art. Well, we even don't really learn Fujian art. I mean, the language that they use in mainland China, which is very different from Hong Kong, we use Cantonese. So the language is different. And the Chinese culture or Chinese like painting is not common in our school. It's not in any like, secondary school. So mostly we are inspired by the Western art or the Impressionism, right? I think you are the same. You probably is the same, even like we have 10 years difference, but you experience the same education, like it's the same education background. And not until we went to the Chinese university when we start to learn the Chinese art, right? I think.
Yeah. So maybe it is good to talk about a little bit of my, how my career started, and then maybe go back. Yeah.
Okay.
But
so you can run through all the slide right now, showing different space in your.
yeah. So yeah, when I was like yeah, in the uni, I was like thinking about a lot of like how painting could be done, because obviously we always have this notion when I was like younger or maybe in high school, and then people are kind of discouraging you to do art because Hong Kong is always like the financial city, always so busy, and then art is not making any money at all. And then but I always and then also even the art teacher will say, oh, you have no advantage at all because you are not in China, so you are not entitled to do Chinese art, and then you don't have that heritage that the mainland people or Chinese people have. But also you are not like a Westerner. You are not like have this heritage that you are doing like Western painting, and then we are always being so discouraged to do Western painting, and then also maybe I kind of see why, because I'm very fortunate because I'm able to travel to Europe at a very young age because my dad used to work in an airline. So we got like free tickets every year, and then we go to London, go to Paris to see the like the classical painting, classical European Western
So
thinking.
we actually have the advantage compared to other high school students.
Yeah, that advantage, but not compared to the people who are really living under that environment. And then,
When you talk about environment, do you mean the social context, right?
I mean, yeah, in social context, but also like I'm living in the UK right now, and then I also have two kids who is studying in the UK, and then kind of when you go to any major museum, when you see like a group of children, when they're only 6, they're already seeing this. It is kind of in their daily life, and then also they go to like churches or they go to a lot of
Probably
other
that's very
places.
common in here, like that. A little bit more background is like in Hong Kong, when we study Western art, as I said, in high school, we only read from books,
Catalogs,
catalog books, and that time internet is not that common. I mean, in my age, the internet is not that common. So we read from books, we read from a high quality print, and then we imagine how the arts, like when we go wherever, how they made such a beautiful painting. I still remember, like, because in my age, like, I saw a lot of high quality print, and that high quality print actually even better than the original painting because it showed the close up, so detail, and you can do that in the museum. So there's a lot of through, I think it's through a kind of imagination how it was at that time.
Yeah. I think that's also looking back is kind of like an advantage because kind of all this good stuff that came from your head didn't really happen in our physical world. So when you look at the real piece, and then actually what you were thinking is actually maybe a little bit more than the actual
So you have
object.
over imagination.
Yeah, and then trying to achieve your over imagined target. But also you were talking about we're looking at the painting, and then we kind of also have several versions of the same work as well. Because if you look at this picture, the print may be a little bit off color, or some may be a little brighter, and then some may be a little darker. And then even the same painting or same work will kind of have a different idea because you were looking at different version of
But when you
those
travel,
prints.
like you could travel, you could get advantage. Like you travel to Europe and then you also study in Chinese University of Hong Kong, the fine department. So you actually have to do because in the Chinese university we have to study Chinese art, right? We need to study calligraphy, ink painting at the same time, drawing, and also oil painting. So I remember our professor is saying like that, oh, this is the most difficult course in the world because for 3 years you need to learn 5,000 years of Western art at the same time, the 5,000 years of Chinese art. And it's just such a short period of time.
3 years.
Yeah, in 3 years. But of course, we extend 1 more year, 4 years, but then still it's really short. So how that inspire you actually, you think?
I guess it was, I think for me personally, I was just trying to get the best of it, like from both. And like I said, and there's always like a very old notion to, in Hong Kong, we're trying to like Hong Kong is a place that is with West, and then what you're doing is trying to combine both elements together. But for me, I always feel this is like an impossible task. Like you're not trying to combine it. And this is also kind of what the older generation trying to do. Like I said, they go to France to study art, and also they're combining their heritage as a Chinese, you know, as Chinese, and then they're doing Chinese ink art or Chinese traditional art. for me, it's more like, yeah, what I'm trying to do is actually just to explore the uncharted area between these two waypoints. And then, because sometimes when you wanted to just find new things, it is quite hard if you don't have any, directions, and then you didn't know the scale and all these things between. But when you start to see like this two-way point, and then you start to have some reference point, and then you're more clear about like those areas, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, like when this is your studio in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah, this is actually the first studio in Hong Kong, which is in a very old area, like a very urban area, and then as you can, sorry, we go back to the exterior, yeah, so it is like a very old building, which is this. I always feel like this couldn't be more Hong Kong because, as you see, there is a highway which is just next to my building, and I can actually literally.
So you're same level as the highway.
Yeah, so it is. I can literally jump from my studio onto the highway, and then
It's not like car and speeding.
yeah.
So do you find any inspiration from that?
Not really. I mean, yeah, I could never get a business because there is always, car racing by in 2 a.m. at night. Yeah, kind of this is the urban environment that I was living and also working in my very first studio.
When is it? Is it 2013?
Around like after my graduation, this is like 2013. And then back then, so when I was like a fresh graduate from uni, and then I was like I have like a group of classmates to talk about our artistic direction, and then we're trying to figure out like we wanted to be an artist, and then what should we do like, and this is also kind of a hard topic for everyone, right? When you were like 20 and then you want to do something big, you should do something great. And then, but for us, we always lament over the fact that we were born in the 90s. And then our teenage years actually spent in the early 2000s, which is, I think, maybe is the most peaceful time at least in Hong Kong or in the Far East area, because everything is so prosperous, and then there's not much conflict around that area. And then we're having like a very fairy tale time
When you enjoy the freedom.
yeah, and we have more freedom. We don't have. Obviously, there is a lot of unfairness in the society, but we're also kind of enjoying a lot of, peaceful time. And then, yeah, and also in Hong Kong, as a lot of people may not know, that it is the majority of people is Chinese, and then there is a minority group in Hong Kong, but there is not much like racial conflict, and also obviously I'm not belong to the minority group, so we didn't face any of those problems, and we're kind of just enjoying a very peaceful peaceful life. And then when we try to find a topic, and then we to work on is actually really hard. It's like
Because it's too comfortable, too peaceful.
well, it's not nothing. Yeah, and then if we do something, it's
The same as Vancouver.
I'm not sure.
Think about what?
Yeah, but I guess back then is if you try to pick the topic, it is or at least for me, it's always appears
Do you
and
try to keep
trying to.
away from this social issue, or actually you are looking for some social issues or context into your work?
I think, and also there's a struggle for me is that I'm thinking if I start to notice there is like some social context or some unfairness in the society, should I do something as an artist, or should I do something as a citizen, like go on a protest, or do some in a more or should I do it in an artistic way? So
I think that has been a very big question for artists, especially came over, like went through 2019, and even before that, I think there's a lot of tension between Hong Kong, China, or with other cultures. But then I'll say let's go back a little bit. Is like that time when you graduated 2013, you have the studio here, and and I was actually graduated around 2002, so we are 10 years difference. And what happened in that 10 years actually is when I start my studio, I was in a industrial building in Hong Kong. Industrial building in Hong Kong is like it's not like here the warehouse, like just like 2 story. But in Hong Kong it's like maybe 10 or over 10, 15 stories, and artists is only a small part of it. And we start to make our own studio and open studio to public. At that time, even in our school, there's no emergent, like there could be a full-time artist in the city. Even our professor, they don't believe that. But then, because the change of the art scene in Hong Kong, because of Empress and also the art scene, so it becomes possible. And the art scene changed dramatically in that 10 years since I graduated 2002 until yours is 2013, right?
yeah.
So, but my year was more like we had to do everything by ourselves because we have only 21 art students out of 7 million people. Hong Kong is just a small city, but they host 7 million people. But there was only 21 fine art students, practically fine art students in our city at that time when I studied in Chinese university. It doesn't really mean that it's very difficult to get in. It just means that there are a lot of people that want to study art. And so they expand the department, so it's only like 21 students. But then I think after like 2000 and 2013, in your time, there's already room to 200 or 500 students, art students in the city.
Like every year they have like about 500, maybe too much, but maybe 300 something every year.
Yeah. So actually, because of that reasons and also the change of art scene, and you become like when you graduate, you could project yourself as an artist and have your own studio to work on, right?
Yeah, or at least have this market or industry that could support young artists to do just their creation as a to earn a living or yeah.
I remember at that time you are not only doing painting. Actually, you did some really interesting project. For example, you did a project in the school which is try to approach a kind of failure, right? Can you tell us about a little bit like this kind of practice that you did in your career?
Because when you're a student, you're kind of fearless and you're trying to do stupid stuff. And then basically we came up with a project that some of them is like we don't have like a clear goal, like it's just like wandering. But also some of us are like we try to set our goal to failure, like try to fail, do something really big, but it's bound to fail. We're trying to build a structure that is bound to fall, or we're trying to like build a pool in the gallery, right? Yeah, yeah, basically it is, and then at that time, because as a student, you're allowed to book a venue and then to show your work that you work in the studio, and then like every now and then you have like group of students come together and then they will show their paintings, they will show their like calligraphy.
So you're intentionally not to show your painting.
Yeah, the group of yeah, group of my friend, and then we're trying to kind of be rebellion and then try to think out of the box, and then we're not going to show any of our work. We're just like having this space to do a lot of experiment. That is, yeah, and then we set a goal which is like bound to fail. Something.
So what kind of failure you achieved?
We got a very serious email from the department that we damaged the computer. Yeah, we basically, because like I said, we tried to do a pool and we kind of flooded it.
And you fill it with water?
Yeah, okay. We spent a lot of effort to transport all the water from our studio to classes, and then yeah, basically it was fun. Like because I remember the idea is just to create to build a pool and then a wall, and then at the very corner there is like a pathway to somewhere, but actually it's just like it's the corner of that gallery. So basically everybody have, like I said, because every now and then all the students is like getting their venue to do projects, and then everyone is so familiar with that space, and then everybody who come to see the show actually know like how the space look like or feel like. But we're trying to create something that is non-existent. Like we're trying to build a wall, and then there was like a kind of like here, and then that it feels like it will lead somewhere, but actually everyone knows there's just a dead end. Yeah. So basically, I think I think it's quite useless. Like we're trying to do something very useless, but it gives us some feeling, like a particular feeling.
So do you think it should be useless?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. That's why also this exhibition title, I do nothing every day, is also kind of a question that I gave myself in this period of time. Yeah, but I think I'll go back to.
But for this exhibition title,
Yeah.
actually, sometimes I wonder, are you a kind of against some value or a kind of rebellion as well? What's the title? Can you?
Yeah, the title is
This exhibition.
Yeah, I do nothing every day.
Yeah.
Which is borrowed from Winnie the Pooh, and there was a story about he's talking like, I was like reading that book with my children, and then so one of the stories is like Winnie the Pooh asking like people said it's impossible, nothing is impossible. Kind of like how we taught our children, or how I was taught, like when I was younger, and then people say we can achieve anything if we wanted to. And then when you go older, you feel like may not be the reality.
So what's the reality for you?
I mean, like different people, they have different. Yeah, but for me, it's kind of maybe I was becoming more and more cynical after like all these unfairness or things happened in Hong Kong or all over the world, and then I mean it's not like a fairy tale, like I said in my teenage year, it's kind of like a completely different thing. But also in the middle of the pool, and then it is kind of saying nothing is impossible. And then Winnie the Pooh just said, I do nothing every day. Yeah, because if you know, like Winnie the Pooh is kind of just having fun in the forest and then doing nothing. And
So you did the same.
yeah,
I think it is wandering in the forest that inspire your work. That's the
yeah, I guess it was more like a question because I was just trying to say like
in Hong Kong you cannot find forest to wandering, right?
yeah, so back then when I was just a fresh graduate, so I wanted to do something which will keep me interested throughout my career, and then so I was kind of feel like being in this environment, probably trying to find a way to deal with my like unsubstantial life, this ordinary life may be the hardest thing to do in that moment. Like, and probably because at that time, some of my friends is also very interested in the book. It's called The Unbearable Lightness of Being. And then, it is also kind of having this idea because like some people they deal with the hard things or the hardness in life, but some people also choose to just accept that you're ordinary, and then that is actually a very hard thing to do already, to bear that lightness.
So when is your most difficult time so far, you think?
Most difficult time,
In your life so far.
yeah, and I think it was maybe about like 3 years ago when I decided to move to the UK and then kind of leaving my birthplace in Hong Kong. Yeah, and also it also like catch up to the book I just mentioned because kind of it was talking about the spring in Prague and then people facing these dramatical changes in the society, and then different people have like different approach to the same situation. And then, yeah, for me, kind of give me like a different level of understanding of the book when I was like growing older. And yeah, for me, is yeah, back then was like trying to set this lifelong project or to try to portray my the portrait of my life and also the passage of time. And then back then in the studio was just my very first stop, and then I haven't met my wife yet. We obviously the children haven't appeared yet, but I was like trying to depict the studio where I work and where I live, and then yeah, this is the interior of the studio, and then this is kind of you can see I was just trying to depict the environment, and then yeah, and then
Well, actually, at that time you're still not that big. But why your painting so big? What does this scale mean to you? Because in this exhibition you will find some small painting upstairs, and there's some quite huge, right? That is almost like
4 meters with yeah.
4 meters. And then, so how you understand all this scale means to you?
I think the scale of the work is actually I was always trying very hard to get the canvas or get the picture that is closer to life size, which and maybe need to obviously because the surface area is bigger and it will allows me to explore more what could be done in a picture. And but also because what I'm trying to do is actually I'm not depicting the subject itself, but I'm actually depicting the experience of seeing things. And and I would say like a bigger picture is like closer to our experience of like seeing things in this physical world. And yeah,
But when you talk about the passage of time as like painting, like that one, like because it's out of control, right? The dog has the grip of control running around in your studio, right? So are you based on photo or you just make the marks on the canvas?
So basically, at that time, as you can see, I live and I also work in the same place. So basically, I don't need a photo. If I wanted to depict my dog, and then I just look at them because they're just right next to me. And then like the window, and then the sofa is all there. So basically, I'm just living and working in the same place and it's same. So it is kind of more like a spontaneous process of when I'm like trying to recognize this place,
Right.
and then what I
But do you start a specific corner or you just start overall on the surface?
I think
You can see in these pictures, right? The plant actually is highest density, like high intensity, right? It's very detailed, and then some of plant actually is very loose, and just some dot marks on it, right? And of course, I saw how you make painting, but could you explain a little bit the process to the audience? Like, do you start like some part of it, or like you just randomly like making a dot marks and on the canvas?
Yeah, I think at that time I was what I'm trying to depict is actually how we. So I always ask people, maybe just close your eyes and then try to think about how your home looks like, which is probably the most visited places in your home, in your life, right? And then, but there is always some spot which is appear more clearly to you, but also there is some spot which is maybe you've forgotten. And then even I always ask people to try to when you go back home today and then try to think or try to imagine how the ceiling of this space looks like. And then probably
It's always like seeing and forgetting, right?
Yeah,
Because
so-
I remember when you do it's like always up, and then some area, and then
And then the blank area of the painting or of the picture is actually kind of represent the bit that I had forgotten,
right.
or I couldn't quite imagine how it was. But I think it is also coincidentally like kind of match the idea of the negative space or blank spaces in Chinese painting. And
So that's what the Chinese painting inspired you.
yeah, kind of. But also I feel like, but there's obviously when you look at the painting, it wouldn't make you feel it is like the empty. They're empty. There is like kind of something is there, but you just can't remember.
Right.
This kind of feeling, yeah.
But do you also apply this kind of technique since 2014, right?
Yeah.
Do you also have this kind of thinking process in your recent work? I mean, is the work in this exhibition or from last year? This year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was the other way around. Actually, back then I wasn't thinking that clearly.
It's always good to do this look back and answers.
Yeah, I guess it's more like back then I was just discovered something
Right.
that interests me.
Right.
And then what I was talking about is kind of like all in hindsight.
Right.
Yeah, but it continues to today's practice, like kind of carry on, which is like I said, my work has been like a continuous flow and like a lifelong project. And then the works in this exhibition, or probably the work I am going to do is like a descendant of what I have done in the past. So yeah, and also the subject itself, like also like I said, like the dogs.
How important is it? You keep like doing a lot of
Yeah.
this space and other space. that time it's more in your space, right? And then this is more like in nature.
I think it is important, but also at the same time it's not that important. So
Understand. Okay, let's understand what you're talking. Okay,
yeah, so
let's try to explain a little bit more.
yeah, so so one time when people asked me, oh, if my book is about family portrait, and then I was like, it got me thinking because probably not because on the surface it is about my family, right? But I'm also thinking maybe 10 years later when the kids go to college and then when they all become teenager and then they will, have their own life. And they might start to disappear in my painting. And then when they grow up, and then obviously my dog, my dog, the yellow one you see now actually passed away last year. And then he didn't really appear in my painting anymore because I didn't get to live with him and then didn't see him as much as before, and then it's like gradually like disappear. And then so it is also for me like I said, the kid will grow up and then they will move out, and then maybe later they will come back with their partner, and then maybe more kids, more dogs, or less kids, and then next door. And then it's kind of what I imagine how this project will go and how this project will end. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, so probably like the family members, obviously if I got divorced with my wife, I think it possibly won't happen, but yeah, it's
I
kind of
think it's
funny.
not only a record, right? I mean, if a record or a pictures documentary, then how you compare, like it's just a photo that you can just make snapshot on your subject matter compared to you could easily create. And it could be as easy as like just use a phone and use snapshot. Oh, I remember all this. But for you, you keep like constantly on your family members and you do painting, right? So how you compare with like if it's just a documentary, then why not a photo?
Yeah, I don't think it is actually a documentary of my life, but it's more about how we understand it. Because for me, I always like regard my painting actually more as a writing, like more like how we try to reconstruct what is around us.
Mm.
And then like every thought or every line, and it's kind of like a paragraph or a sentence of how I try to understand those things that appear in my life.
And actually, I could have very strong sense about when you look at this painting. I think I could have very strong sense of like writing, because in Chinese ink art, especially, yeah, calligraphy or painting, like we use the same. Sometimes we could use the same brush for writing and painting. Right? So in Chinese, we say you're writing a painting. You use writing that kind of technique or that kind of movement. Actually, you are creating a painting based on that. So when I look at your painting, I associate all this process with that background. But of course, probably it could be just my imagination because honestly speaking, like I've been in London, like in my early life, and then I found that like you or my painting, when we show it in the Western context, they will understand it as an Asian art. But then when we were in Hong Kong, they will understand our art as a Western painting. So sometimes it's like kind of this kind of shift. But I mean, that kind of awareness, do you think that have been in your practice, that kind of awareness of this cultural inspiration, that cultural, you have that kind of awareness and you want to express that understanding? Or you just leave it as just one of your inspiration and that's it?
Yeah, I think it's more like the latter. More like the approach of just borrowing this idea or just discover this idea, which is amazing. That it could give me a more freedom in my artistic creation. And then one of the ideas is when you talk about the Chinese painting, actually the way I see it is actually no Chinese painting and no Chinese calligraphy because there shouldn't be a category like that because basically they're the same thing. And then if we look at some Chinese painting and we will always see they have painting, but also they will have uh, writing. And most of the time it is like a poem. And then in Chinese tradition, it's more like it is more about the scholar, the scholarship rather than. So you see, they always appear in the same. There's one thing, like more like yeah. And then for me,
I think in your early work, you will show quite a lot of white space, but in this, for some of this exhibition, there's quite a few of the work actually, like the one behind us, right? It's with a dark background.
Yeah.
So, was there any change in your mind or practice when you moved to UK, or is there any inspiration that inspired you to make painting?
I think when I moved to the UK, and like I said, I feel like it is much more easier for me to access to the classical painting in a Western culture.
Right.
And then it kind of recalled like because and I start to feel like actually I was like always feel too entitled to do painting in a way that people could relate to Chinese painting or Chinese tradition. Yeah.
Do you think that's important for you to relate your work to Chinese
I guess it is
painting?
not so important actually. Yeah. Otherwise, I will keep doing that and keep doing that until people see and people can. And also when I moved to the UK, and then if I always feel like I was trying to learn a language and then try to communicate with other people. And in painting, it is also kind of like a language I want to master. And then that will, to me, that will make me easier to communicate with other people or around the world, And if
So
something,
do you believe that language could be, or visual language could be universal?
I think it is universal, and also because what I'm doing, the subject matter, like I said, it's not merely my family. It's actually, for me, I always feel like it is a shared experience. Like everyone in life, they have this moment of mundane and like this boring, nothing uneventful moment. And then we're always trying to find a way to deal with it. Or maybe we're trying a way to forget it and neglect it. And yeah, but I feel like when I always wanted to, for me, I do a lot of painting and then I was just, for me, it's kind of feel like I was just trying to scream to people that, oh, I discovered something like that in my life. And then I'm trying to just find another people that will feel like, oh, I know, like I also got that, like this kind of connection. Yeah.
It's more like universal language kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how's because you have been talking about wandering in the forest after you moved to Texas, right?
Yeah. Sunset.
Sunset.
Yeah.
So how's that experience? And inspire you to this group of work?
For me, because I also
doing nothing every day, just walk in the forest, or
well, basically, like it is like like have this routine that I will drop a key to school, and then the forest is actually right next to a kid's school, and I will walk the dog every day in the forest, and then chatting with my wife, or like just or maybe just enjoy the view and the dog walk, and then and then go to studio and then try to depict this my life go one step ahead, and then my painting is also go the next, and it goes then on and on. And then I feel like, so one day I was like thinking, actually that is quite useless. And it's just walking. Yeah, it's just walking for no reason. But also, like I said, when I was growing up, and then people always give you this idea that you're supposed to achieve something great, right? It's not like you're working for no purpose at all. And then if you work, you should have like a target. You should have, maybe I will go to the supermarket and then you start working. It's not like you should just start working without a reason.
So your exhibition title actually is kind of against this kind of idea.
Well, I guess it is.
It was different. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like maybe just do and then without achieve something. Yeah, like this kind of experience, and for me it's more about, and I always feel like painting is interesting because painting meant to be seen, right? Like if you do something, it's actually, or like music is meant to be heard. It's not meant to be touched or meant to be seen. Like, yeah, but painting is kind of meant to be seen, and then it is kind of like it has this direct relation to our sight, one of our sensation. And then for me, it's so important that we kind of forget, in modern day, we kind of forget our sensation at all. Like, we're so focused on our knowledge. Like, when we saw something, we kind of have this illusion that, like, oh, we know, but we never experience. And then, like,
Actually, it's something that I want to ask you, especially when you look at these pictures. Like if you cover the left side of the eye, then okay, we know that okay, dog and eye, that looks really pretty much as it look, right? And then when I look at this part, it doesn't really make sense, right? It doesn't make sense why it was black. And when you look at your painting, you have a lot of this kind of like, I would say like a kind of off balance or not really close to what you really visual experience. So this is like something that how I mean what's your thinking of when you create all this kind of work?
yeah, for me, there is always this balance of it doesn't make sense, but
So you have usually like to off balance, but to make just not the balance.
yeah, but for me, it's actually the way I work is I didn't like finish a painting on one day,
Right.
and then it's more like the accumulation of experience. It's how I tried to depict the passage of time, like because the routine is like I do kind of the same thing every day, so it repeat every day, and then but also there's some subtle differences inside, and so sometimes it's like when I depict my dog, and then probably I will have finished. I mean, like finished depicting her in different days, and then I kind of have a different idea about her. So it is more like a different. It's more like a memory escape, like a memory escape. Like it's more. Yeah, but also because back then I was also very interested in, like I said, like impressionists, and then they have this idea of how things appear to your eye, but they're more focused on in an optical way, right? Like optically, how they appear to you. For me, I'm also kind of borrow that idea, but in a more psychological way, like how we try to understand that and then try to recreate that image or recreate that understanding in our head. And in a way, like I said, like all these optical um, appearance may not make sense, but in a way you still can recognize. And then I have this experience when I was like still a college student, and then I went to teach some young people to draw. And one day this little kid kind of so every day I would prepare some cartoon image for them to copy, and then I would try to teach them how to copy them.
Did you do the same when you were a kid?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Yeah,
It's like Japanese comics.
I try to copy them. Yes, yeah. And I actually prepared like a blue elephant, which is quite common, right? For some strange reason, we always feel like elephants should be like pale blue. But the story goes, this kid is just wrapping a very like a black crayon and then doing this and then just draw like a ball. Like obviously he's like 2 or 3 years old, right? Or like 5. I can't quite remember this. Like young kid, and then like probably he's just like not paying attention and not don't want to follow the instruction at all. And then I asked him what it is, and then he said it is a cat. And it struck me like, could it be a cat? Like, could it be some cat that sleeping and throw around like a fur ball that he saw previously, and then he related it as a cat. Whereas we in real life,
over-imagination again.
yeah,
That's how we learn art, right?
yeah, but also it caused impression that in real life we didn't really see like a pink elephant, right?
Right.
But when we see a cartoon of a pink elephant, we could relate it to, oh, it's an elephant. So at which point that like, so when I'm doing painting and then when I'm trying to depict something like dot by dot and line, putting each line, and at which point we start to recognize things. Like at which point we can relate, oh, it's a dog, oh, it's a tree. And then like some line you may not put, you cannot like relate to anything at all. It's just a line. It is something on the canvas.
Yeah, actually, this really makes sense, and that's why I think your painting actually some of them is very interesting. Like the one behind this column, that you have a like very long stroke, and it doesn't really look like a tree, but because of this setting, will imagine probably is a trunk, right, or a tree. But then for you, it's just at that time you just need some stroke. Is it like on the surface?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, but like that later on when other things appear, and it suddenly, at a moment, it becomes Trump as well. So
Right.
this is always this very chaotic and yeah, chaotic experience, and they all goes together. I also prepare this like it's a painting, very famous painting from Wu, and this is also one of the examples that how we try to relate it. For us, it's very easily we have so hold very dearly to our heart because it is some architecture in Hangzhou, yeah, And then we are so amazed by how he could depict this white wall and then black roof, which is very iconic in China. But for other people, like because I also when I'm in the UK and I was talking about to like the UK people, and then they never been to Hangzhou, they never saw some architecture like that, and then they could never relate that to yeah, and then all these amazing skills kind of doesn't really matter to them anymore. Yeah, for us it's like it's crazy. I mean, like how could he do something like that? But for other people, they if they don't have those experience, and then they suddenly become worthless. So
Or maybe they cannot like make reference to that.
yeah,
I think like everyone we have that kind of experience in our life that it's like what you said, and we are accumulated with different cultures or our own perspective. That we carry our own glasses to look through all this work. And for us, maybe we understand easily like this architecture building. For them, it's just a line up, right? And but for you, you are not as minimal as abstract as like this, right? Is it somehow when you do this painting, you are intentionally to kind of bring back all these brushstroke and colors back to a more like a like the subject matters that you are depicting. So you are how you adjust that kind of from the abstract to realism. There's a great area between them, right? So do you think about that when you do your work? Like for example, if your subject matter is disappeared, for example, that piece, and you left a lot of just broken stroke and marks, will you satisfy with that, or for you, that subject matter is necessary to be in that space?
I think that yeah, that's a very good question because sometimes I also did some work which the subject matter was not in there. Like it's just like pure. I wouldn't say it's landscape, even it's not landscape, but it's just very abstract. But for me, it's yeah, those were like didn't really satisfy me at all. Like I always feel like what I'm trying to depict is yeah, I guess it goes back to the question that like the family member appear in the painting is it important? I guess it's important in a way. Like I said, it's important, but also at the same time, it doesn't have to be always like that.
Right.
Because of yeah.
Actually, I have this question because I used to work on landscape as a reference or images. And after I moved to Vancouver 2 years ago, and all my Chinese reference of this part landscape, mountains, and I have been went through a process of like I I broke it down. So I have only like all the stroke and broken stroke. And even the mountain, the shape is kind of broken. And that's how I feel when I moved. I left my hometown, Hong Kong. That's how when I read your work, you have this method there that hold everything together. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I just associate with these differences because at the time I think I have been spent quite a long time that I don't really want to leave Hong Kong, but eventually, I mean, I just need to change in time, and I left. So I was wondering how that moment comes to you and how's the feeling?
I guess in a very romantic way, you could say when I left Hong Kong and then go to a new environment, and then what I was left is actually my family. Like so, yeah, I guess like one of the reasons why after I moved to the UK and then all the family members or all the dogs become more and more profound is they are actually the closest and the most familiar things to me at that moment. And then all this like new environment is not really I'm familiar with. Like in Hong Kong, there's a lot of like tropical plants. When I go for a walk, it's always like tropical plant and evergreen plants. But in the UK, it's always like so. It's like ever changing, like with the following seasons, and then all these.
Yeah, London's very famous for 1 day for 4 seasons. I know.
Yeah. And yeah, and also I feel like whenever I do a landscape, I feel like they're just places rather than yeah. It's more like if they're not here, it's not really what I'm trying to depict. It's not like a day in my life already. It's more like just places. Yeah. It could be like some very cold information of like some places like appear geographically in.
But you have an intention to build a relationship or have belonging to that places.
Yeah, I think what's more important to me is what happened in those places rather than the places itself.
Right.
Yeah. So
just make something happen in the place where you are living now.
yeah, I guess but those happening doesn't necessarily to be like something eventful.
Yeah.
Like yeah, like the dog walk. Like so like this forest, like in this exhibition, like all the work is actually depict a forest that we walk around, which is also the forest which Winnie the Pooh was raised in because they all famously lived in the same area. And yeah, the forest itself had a lot of happening already. Like there's a long history and so much, mysterious things happen in UK forest. But for me, it's more like, oh, we used to go there, or we keep going there every day. So this
So
is.
are you going to continue to walk your dog and continue your journey?
Yeah, I think
like this exhibition actually is just a full stop.
No, it's actually right before I leave from Canada. Like here, I'm still working on dogs in the same forest. Yeah, so I guess it is like until maybe something happen, which I don't know. Like maybe we'll move again, or maybe we will, yeah. But let's see. But yeah, for me, it's more like this kind of organic process of how the subject matter, because in a way the subject matter itself is also like an ever-changing thing. So yeah.
I think because I feel like because you both mentioned about the migration, and you mentioned a lot about the context behind. Actually, for both of your work, you've used traditional Chinese art in the working process, and we have a conversation about the context, how to provide audience more context, and whether they can make it. For example, whether after you move, whether the British audience will be able to make that reference. So I'm actually really interested to know that after you move, for both of you, do you actually feel like a change in terms of entitlement or a change in terms of responsibility that you have to convey or use more of the elements, or you have to provide more context in terms of the subject that you depict?
I mean, Yeah, for me, it's kind of go back to what we were talking about this black painting. Yeah, because as you can see, my previous work usually I work on like a more like white background because for me is white kind of represent nothing in a way. And then when I start to work on the right background, it's like I'm trying to reconstruct something from nothing. And then, and also in a way, it's more like the idea of Chinese painting. And then we work on, like a blank paper, and then the black ink is like you're adding on. And then at a point it is, yeah. But for me, when I moved to the UK, like I said, like I mentioned, is like people didn't really understand this idea, this like cultural background, and then it become. But also they kind of give me a new perspective. When they're talking about my work, and then they see different things, and then I kind of also keep me back from my from my experience or the way I grew up learning about works from the Impressionists. Yeah, so basically I still remember when I go to the UK and then I go to the Somerset House. They have a really nice connection. The Yeah, they have a very nice connection of impressionists like Manet and yeah, and then I was like looking kind of yeah, trace back to also one of my roots. Yeah, because obviously like being a Chinese and then doing Chinese painting or talking about Chinese origin is so typical, right? But for me, growing up in Hong Kong, we also kind of study this and we kind of um, take this as part of our, experience. So kind of like this black painting is also kind of a reflection of how I wanted to trace back to those, yeah.
And for me, I think, honestly speaking, the difference between I think myself and my teacher is I don't feel like I have any responsible for any cultures as an artist. Because I think I'm just responsible for the art that I found is interesting and inspiring, no matter where it come from. And just eventually, because I was born in Hong Kong, I was inspired by Chinese art. And that I found is very interesting. But at some point, I found that inspiration could also find in different cultures. So I would intend to more a playful way to deal with all these cultures instead of you have to take responsible of anything. And and honestly speaking, also like I could tell like from the older generation when they have more responsible, they think the more trapped they have. So I think for me, art is very important to set it free and have that kind of freedom from between cultures. And that's why I think art is interesting. So when I came here, I just kind of, as I said, I breaking down my first stroke into very short stroke, and I'm still undergoing the process of breaking down myself. So it's already up to 2 years already, and I haven't even finished that process. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. So I'm still in that process.
I think we're about the time. So now I think we will have about 10 minutes that we open for questions. I just want to correct what you're talking about with Wu Guanzhong's ink painting. its architecture is not from Hangzhou, it's from Suzhou. So actually, those type of architecture, white wall and black roof, this actually come from Huen style architecture, Huizhou, around Yuan Mountain, south of Anhui area. Yeah, this is what I want to say. And also, from this expression, I can see your work influence very loosely brush strokes and atmosphere. And I can see this Chinese art influence and also the Western style art influence as well. Like you mentioned, you're interested in impressionism, the color you use, I can see that. I have a question about after you moved to UK, I don't know what you say here. I just think if you must see today's contemporary art in London. Is that some influence your art and your thought with your art today?
Yeah, I think there's two ways or two perspectives to look at that. And one is, like we always said, like obviously the environment gives you different elements, and then which is bound to inspire you like different things. And then, but the other perspective to look at it is actually, as an artist, I also think about a practical perspective. And like I said, if I go to see contemporary art scene in a local area, and then obviously I will think about like how should I position myself in this context. Am I going to like change on something or talk about their language, or should I keep on doing what I was doing? No, like, so there is always kind of balance that, but I guess it's not just art, like everything you do, you kind of, trying to think about like how you should position yourself in a way. But also I find it is interesting because yeah, it is it's a different kind of stimulation, like what you could do, and for me in my daily practice is kind of also always I'm always looking for stimulation, like changing from white brown to background is also kind of a way, like a practical way to stimulate myself, like what works here before may not work on here, but also it may. So it is always like an experiment, like, and then kind of you, and also yeah.
It is because now, like for example, in London, the modern page, and today they're showing the work as more conceptual and or new media and this kind of work. But your work is more depicted you surrounding your life. So is that conceptual art something influence you?
I, I guess, yeah, I guess like within the London, one of the things in London which I find interesting is that actually quite um, there's a lot of diversity actually. Like if you wanted to look at classical art, and then there is like National Gallery, like British Museum, and then there's also National Portrait Gallery. There's a lot of like classical painting, and then yeah, I guess it's more like for me, London is always like a interesting place that you can find a lot of different perspective rather than so like one thing is so dominant and then yeah so yeah I guess I can answer your question.
Also quite factual. I mean, from my understanding, because you don't really get like like close to what is like he had to provide a lot of like research time to construct all these images and as I said, like what Chris inspired me or impressed me is since his early age, he had been thinking a lot of like different approach to painting, and that actually impressed me when you are even in the year one students in the school. So there's a lot of good thought behind. Sometimes probably he didn't articulate, but when I look at all these images and all this, like what we said, off balance, that kind of intention, then you will know there's a lot of details that he had been putting on the surface. So that make the painting itself very interesting. And I actually sometimes wondering, like, if we put one of the painting in front of AI, do you ever try? Ask AI to paint, to kind of intimate your painting and create a painting of Chris Bean's style. Have you ever tried?
Yeah, I haven't tried like from scratches, like asking to recreate, but I did try to, because they can generate like a,
Yeah.
like they can expand the image with AI, and then I found it quite interesting because they, at this stage, they're not really looking at the logic behind. It's more like on the surface they're trying to catch up the elements and try to replicate, but they're not really thinking about the logic behind how this element come together and why this element is here and then not there.
So actually AI can create images, but cannot create
like
the logic there.
yeah,
How you build a business art.
yeah.
I'm not going to ask more questions. Open to the floor.
Okay, I'll open it.
I'm really interested in which area you guys grew up in Hong Kong. I came up from Hong Kong as well, so maybe you can both answer like what like your neighborhoods, and also you both talk about it's really hard to leave Hong Kong. That's kind of like tough part in your life, and so would you see yourself as more like an exile, displacement, like? What the hope of going back to Hong Kong, or you see it as this is it, like I left the place and that's the past, or did you guys actually have a dream of going back and live there again?
So I actually grew up in Kun Tong. Kun Tong. And then
It's more like in the
no, so the old studio is actually located in Tai Kok Choi, which is in Kowloon as well. But my old studio is actually my grandpa's home. And when he passed away, and I kind of just became a
in the neighborhood. I remember it's a lot of like metal workshop, right? Metal workshop.
Yeah, so that area used to be like a sheep. Yeah, champagne area.
Some minority, like they live around the area in that.
yeah, a lot of like immigrant from
South Asia.
Southeast Asia, or maybe in India, they will all gather in that part of Hong Kong. And then also a lot of, yeah, because it's a very old neighborhood, and then basically it's like underinvest, but also a lot of young people moved in, and then at
So actually,
yeah,
I think your area.
yeah, it's my own setting.
My area is actually boring. It's just residential. I mean, and from Hong Kong and New Town. I mean, the middle, which actually is like a residential area, like Richmond. It's all residential area, just like some shopping mall. And my studio also is just 5 minutes away from my home. So I just lived in that area for over 40 years. And Shatin. So I have my studio in Futan, Shatin, and Chinese University is just one stop from my home. So I haven't, I mean, of course, I spent some time in New York or London, but eventually, actually, I live in that area within 1 kilometer for over 40 years. But when I moved, I moved here, so it's quite a big move for us. And another question you mentioned about the exile and the hoping to going back Hong Kong, and I remember Edward Said once said the tragedy of being like in exile is like you're always hoping, you always hope to go back to your home. And so I learned from all this experience. So I tell myself, since I left home, I don't really think home again at this moment. And everywhere could be a home. Of course, this is very ideal, and maybe it would become very difficult for me in the future. But at least at this time, I think the move is just make you change your life. That change is I'm looking for. So I lost the idea of permanent home already, and that actually is quite powerful for me as a Hong Kong artist because we have been, like me, I have been working in Hong Kong for years, and we built our career there. We have built our collectors, everything in that small city. But when I'm in my early 40s, I found that actually in some ways, like you'll be trapped by this city. So I think for me, just like it's a way out for myself and also my career. So I'm not quite sure if 10 years later you ask me the same question. Can I answer? Will I answer you like in a very different way? But at this point, yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, for me, probably a little bit the same with Tung Pang's idea, but also the way I think about home is somewhere people will understand you, and I would say like the Hong Kong that will understand me is kind of gone already, and then kind of I'm not like going back unless I could travel full time. But yeah,
Or maybe they don't understand you and you don't understand them anymore.
I mean, yeah, it goes both ways. Yeah, it goes both ways. And yeah.
Thank you so much for the curators and the artists for this very inspiring talk. And well, I have two questions. One is related to because during this discussion, both of you as well as the curator mentioned a lot of Chris' work being influenced or like his stories and icons, motifs, and painting style from the traditional Chinese painting. And you made reference to the work by Guanzhong and his artistic journey actually overlaps with yours a little bit because he started as an oil painter, probably most, and then he learned classical Chinese painting in the second part of his artistic journey. So his style in painting is actually the modern reinterpretation of the Chinese in painting, and also he himself as an art historian also mentioned that at the end of the 20th century, himself as well as the other people working on the street mentioned that this is like the end of ink painting right now. We were talking about the end of the 20th century, so especially then for the 21st century, the situation is even worse. So I was wondering that you two as artists, how do you view the current state of the ink art globally, not only China's ink art, but also some emerging artists from Japan, like Korea, who are trying to be inspired by the traditional ink art? That's my first question. And my second question is, you mentioned that your art sometimes is like doing nothing, and you are purposely trying to stay away from like making art being political. Although you're also like depicting a chaotic thing based on a real understanding of your daily memory. So I'm going to ask, like, do you feel like the kind of creative medium that you choose as an oil painter? Because I've heard that from a lot of ink painters that they dare not to make their art doing nothing. Otherwise, they cannot be categorized as contemporary art. I heard that from multiple artists, especially for those emerging artists, that if they choose ink, because this is recognized as a traditional medium, they dare not to be non-contemporary, non-political. So do you feel like all you actually offers you more freedom of doing nothing as a painting? That's my question. I really don't have time, so you don't have to answer all of them if you find it's a little bit way too tricky for you to answer it right now.
I guess for the first question, I guess should I say like from my understanding is like being an artist is actually more like an explorer, and then for explorer is more like you're trying to discover and trying to grab something, and then for what you're seeing is like for the next generation or the people come after us should be inspired by something. I guess it shouldn't be like an artist job. It's more like maybe the historian or curator, they take care about like all this relic or all this new discovery found by the explorer, and then they try to build up some system or to build up something for the people to understand all these like all these things, how they come from, how it should be, and then so I guess but as an artist, and I always feel that I always have this naive idea that I just want to do something educational. I just want to do something worth people, their attention. And then, just try to do something inspiring, which is also one of my own experience because when I was a young kid and I go to the museum and I saw something which is really inspiring, and it will inspire me to do something. It makes me want to do like my version. Like I want to go home and then try this and try that, and then I just want to have my that's something inspiring. And I guess it's just basically I just keep this very simple attitude to myself. Yeah, to your first question. And then the second question, I guess, is I think the attitude is kind of more like that. Like you shouldn't like bear. I just like kind of talk to myself. You shouldn't bear too much unnecessary burden, and then just kind of like I said, just do rather than think too much, and then
For me, for both of your question, it's quite, uh, yeah.
His articles treating the discussion back at that time. After that, he also wrote several articles to explain what it means in nature by movement. But most people understand that as stroke work painting because to zero. Well, that's the most straightforward translation, English translation. What do you think about that?
Well, actually, all your three questions for me is the same answer. No matter when you talk about art, traditional art, or contemporary art, if it doesn't make sense to what you understand the world right now, then it doesn't make sense anymore. So for me, it's always the first question is how you understand the world right now, and how this will matters in art, traditional art, or contemporary art, and how it makes sense and connect to your understanding. That actually is, for me, is a basic. And every moment of the past have their contemporary, right? So that's why I will emphasize how at this point you understand all these things relate to the world that they're right now into it. So I always have that approach when I look at the traditional art or whatever ink art or contemporary art. For me, actually, they are the same because I think I'm not a scholar trying to divide them. Instead, I'm trying to make them become of a glass for me to understand the world right now and then combine.
Open up the question, one last question.
I do have a question in regards to, you kept mentioning or referring back to your inspiration early on with Impressionist paintings. One thing that was fascinating is, of course, you're working in landscape or outdoor settings now versus in your earlier work, a lot of it was done in interior, right, in the spaces in which you were living. Impressionist paintings, of course, came from this plein air, right, working outdoors and getting quick brush strokes because it was the impression of what they were seeing as they were working in nature and in the environment. And so it quickly changed. And as you mentioned, as you're painting, because you're painting over days versus how the original Impressionists were painting, where they were no outdoors and this in reflection of the actual environment changes, you're able to create changes that reflect how your mind forgets or remembers things or changes in feeling. But I'm curious, because you're working on such a large scale and thus having to take much longer than if you look at the original Impressionist paintings, they're actually quite small usually because they're working outdoors and they're working very quickly. How do you think the scale impacts how you visually take from the aesthetics of Impressionism, but actually emotionally still imbue this concept of very quick changes over a day? Or do you think that they have a clear divide now because you're taking from the aesthetics and not so much maybe the feeling of the original Impressionist painters?
I guess so yeah, it actually is a very good question, and it's been really hard to like speak in very to explain it very clearly for me. But I guess it's more like the process of, like I said, recently I was thinking about this word like memory escape, and then where I'm trying to put something really like memory is a kind of interesting thing that when we talk about memory is that something really happened in the past or something that more like a perception, like say when I was like with Tung Pang about things that happened 10 years ago. Probably that is like maybe there's a fact like we meet at that time, but also something that is maybe more like the perception of something that happened or could have happened. So for me, in my painting, I always like trying to do something like that because, like in a painting, like even the subject matter is not really my goal. They probably just a representation of my dog or how I understand that. And like my dog is right now in the UK, yeah, they're not here. But also, it's just a representation of them being in a place at that, yeah. So I guess, so that's why I was like always thinking in that like the psychological perspective that things could have happened. It's a mixture of cool things that could have happened, but also in a day-by-day occurrence that it is something happened there. So yeah, so it is like a relationship between these two dimensions. Yeah, for me, like the impressionist is always more about the optical, like how light works and how we perceive light, yeah, and color as well.
Because hearing and thinking about the question also reminds me of the experiment that you mentioned about earlier that you did in university, where you're always obsessed with the space, kind of creating an optical illusion of seeing the structure that expands, but actually it's a dead end. And then your painting with the scale kind of give people that illusion that there's an open window towards a different world or like towards something bigger outside.
Yeah, but ultimately, I think what I'm always trying to achieve is something actually really intangible. Like maybe it's just a feeling, or it's just like a sensation experience. And yeah, it is also applying to my current practice. It's more like when you look at it, it's like a reminder of you could have this experience before as well. Like, yeah.
It's very interesting. Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming to the panel talk, and I would like to also thank Tung Pang and Chris for sharing. And so the panel talk itself will also be, the documentation will also be available on YouTube. So after this panel talk, if you wanted to go back and listen, you can always go to CW Cuber's YouTube channel. It will be live there as well. And this exhibition goes till November 9th, so you still have time to come back and visit the exhibition. Thank you everyone for tonight, and I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend.